Hi there, Sherry Schreiber of GettingBetter.com. And I'm probably going to meander a lot today because I haven't completely cohesively ordered what exactly I want to talk to you about. And I think it's because it's such a vast topic. So I hope you'll bear with me as I explore what I really want to say to you and speak with you about, because it may not come out in a cohesive way. It may be a little disjointed, but excuse me, hairs. But I'm hoping it makes sense overall. Someone I know just in the past 24 hours exposed me to a video by a very brilliant doctor. I'm guessing he's a psychiatrist, maybe a psychologist. And it was an interview with his grown son, and they were each talking about their relationship from their respective points of view. And I'd watched some other things by this doctor, some other videos, and I thought, wow, this is a guy who's really brilliant. I mean, his views on core injury, although he doesn't use that terminology, but his views on human pain are really echoing mine. They're very similar to mine. And yet, as I listened intently to this interview, where he and his son alternated talking to the audience, I guess it was some kind of seminar, 2 or 3 day type of thing, what became very apparent to me was the father's profound narcissism. And I even commented online about my impressions of this father-son dyad, and which I then copied to my Facebook page, where I do most of my blabbing these days about various issues pertaining to life and love. But I could see that the son at 40 years old is still very painfully struggling to get his father's blessing, to receive his father's respect, to be looked at and seen as a viable young man with genuine value and worth, and he can't get it. Oh, he gets an occasional, I really respect you for that, from the dad. Little morsels, little crumbs. But we see him really struggling for many years to get his father's love, his respect, his approval, his acceptance, and he's still working at it. He's still trying for it. I find this somewhat tragic. I think a lot of parents presume that the dependency we had on them as infants, as babies, as toddlers, just continues indefinitely. And that because of that dependence in the earliest stages of our life, we don't dare ever think about separating, individuating, saying goodbye to that parent. I think the parent mistakenly assumes that the child who's struggling to form a solid bond, a nourishing solid bond with that parent, will continue indefinitely to strive for it, no matter what the cost to him or her. And I find this quite tragic. And I become a huge proponent of people not keeping themselves in that struggle. Because I think until the parent can realize that they are at high risk of losing any connection to that child, be they male or female, or whatever their chosen gender preference is. I think until the parent recognizes this, accepts this, owns this, that they could in fact lose forever that connection with that child, the child has no power whatsoever. No power whatsoever. It cannot separate, cannot individuate, cannot ever gain real approval, affection, attention, nourishment, respect, love from the parent. And yet, for some reason, adult children never want to even think about going through whatever mourning is going to be essential for them to experience in finally surrendering this wishful thinking that they will one day be able to form and maintain a solid, nourishing bond with their parent. It's the mourning we're afraid of. It's the grieving for that lost attachment, which we never, most of us, never really had in the first place. Clients of mine have said to me, oh, if I let go of this connection with my dad or with my mom, then I'll be totally alone. Maybe some of you can relate to this. And my question in response to them is always the same. When, over the course of your entire life, have you not felt totally alone? When, over the course of your entire life, have you not experienced the painful longing and yearning for a secure attachment with this parent? So a lot of us grow up interpreting this painful longing and yearning for love with the emotion itself. Painful longing and yearning has nothing whatsoever to do with love. Real love is never painful, because the one who loves us back is always present and available, supportive, tender, warm, welcoming. It doesn't set us up for this painful longing and yearning for our parents' love, or anybody else's for that matter. Painful longing and yearning for someone's love has not a fucking thing to do with love. It's merely painful longing and yearning. That's all it is. The stuff they write about in country western songs. I've got tears in my ears from lying on my back crying over you. This longing and yearning shit that we start learning about in the first weeks of our life with our mothers who aren't available and present for us. This deep, painful longing and yearning, this hunger, this unquenchable thirst for someone's adoration. It's only there because we never got it when it was age appropriate to get it in the first weeks of our life. A lot of my clients over the years have said to me, my father abandoned us when I was really young. He just left the family. Or he was cruel, he was abusive, he was harsh, he was unyielding emotionally. Your problem isn't with your daddy. He seemed like the worst of two evils. It seemed like your mother was the lesser of two evils because she wasn't harsh with you. She wasn't abusive toward you. She wasn't invalidating or dismissive to you. She was just kind of there, sort of an insignificant figure that was there, who put food on the table for you when you were tiny and throughout your childhood, and she did your laundry for you, and maybe she gave you a hug now and then or comforted you when your feelings were hurt by your father. But she never protected you from him. She saw how abusive and unyielding and cruel he was to her children, but she never took them away to safety by leaving him. Never happened. So basically, it's the mother, the maternal object, that condones the abuse. She puts up with it, she tolerates it, she doesn't mind being controlled, hyper-controlled by a supremely narcissistic spouse. Very oftentimes she's borderline disordered, she's needy, she's weak. She needs firm, rigid boundaries, or she can't feel safe in her world. Borderlines are basically like people without an epidermis, as you might have seen me write about in some of my articles at gettingbetter.com on the borderline personality disorder. They're like a person with no skin holding them in. They're just spilling out all over the place. It's like their innards are oozing out through their pores. They need rigid boundaries. You'll often see them getting involved in fairly strict and stringent and narrowly defined religious influences. You might see a lot of them in the Buddhist community. You might see them as people who throw themselves headlong into yoga practice or working out vigorously at the gym. These are people who really require a firm container, some rigid outer container to hold them together. Without stringent rules and regulations, they're lost. They spill out all over the place. Like a small child, they need firm guidance. They need boundaries. They need rules to follow. If they're left to their own devices, they're lost. Borderlines cannot think independently. They need some governing body to tell them what to believe, how to think, how to behave. They feel safer in that container. They know what to do. They can follow the rules. But if they don't have that, they're quite lost. They're like people with no skin holding them in. Now, I'm getting off on a tangent here because I really do want to get back to addressing the supreme narcissism in this father whose children have such a hard time relating to him. And, okay, so his family, he's sure to include in this talk, in this public format. His family suffered a great deal when he was an infant in a country that was under oppression. Okay, so fine. So the child grows up feeling sorry for the parent, but can never quite feel sorry for himself. if the child is never able to actually look at the abuse that's handed out to him and have sympathy and compassion for himself, because the moment that he feels sorry for himself, that sympathy, that compassion is projected back onto the parent. Oh, but my parent had it so rough. Oh, my mother had it so bad. Oh, my dad had a horrible childhood, and that's why he's not equipped to father me correctly and really be present and loving for me. And this is horseshit. Because that was your parents' life, okay? And they did everything they could to survive that life, just like you're needing to do. And sometimes what you're needing to do is to cut the cord so that you could be free of this feeling of never measuring up to your narcissistic parents' expectations, whether they be your mother or your dad. You know, an interesting thing has happened during the course of my practice. Well, I've worked with people who've said to me, oh, my sister really acted out a lot, or my brother acted out a lot. I was the good kid. You know, I got really good grades in school, and I was always well behaved, and I got excellent reports on my report cards, and my teachers had nothing but accolades to say about me. But which child do you think gets the most attention from the parents? Is it the good child? No, it never is. It's not the good child who gets the attention, who gets the kudos, who gets even noticed by the parents. In fact, very oftentimes they're taken for granted. Excuse me. It's the child who acts out. It's the child who gets in trouble. It's the child who takes drugs and has really destructive relationships that tear them down even further and give them exactly what they think they deserve, that gets all the attention from the parent. And the good child's over here on the sidelines, craving that love, craving that attention, craving the kudos for their performance in school or their athletic ability or whatever it is, never gets the parent's attention. It's basically invisible to the parent. So isn't the parent then rewarding bad behavior in the child who acts out and behaves badly to get attention, and punishing the child, the too good child, who really never gets attention at all? Parent kind of assumes, well, that kid's okay. That kid, if left to their own devices, can raise themselves. It's a tragedy. And I think sometimes when we have a parent who's not so great against a parent who's really downright abusive, just obviously neglectful and abusive, we identify with the not so great parent, because we have to cling to one of our parents, don't we, in context of forming some kind of sense of identity. And we give all our attention, all of our yearning and longing to the parent who's really tough to make a connection with. Same kind of dynamic, isn't it? The parent from whom we are not receiving abuse, we kind of take for granted. They're sort of there. They They try and make up for their spouse's neglect and abuse and harshness, but it really doesn't get the job done. And all of our attention, all of our striving goes to the parent. That's the more obvious problem child. Now, you've heard me say in my articles and in my YouTube videos that our attraction to a borderline disordered partner is really not a daddy issue, no matter how punishing and abusive and how much of an asshole the father is, or a drunk or whatever. Our sense of self, our sense of worth is established in the first weeks of our life with mother. Her tenderness, her adoring looks from her eyes into ours when we're newborns and throughout our infancy experiences. Her willingness to let us develop and grow and become our own person. This is what shapes us. First 3 years of our life, this is what shapes us. This is what gives us our sense of worth and lovability. But if there's an abusive other parent in the space, we're never feeling like we can measure up to them. And our maternal object isn't giving us enough of the good stuff because, well, why would she stay with a supremely narcissistic partner if she were whole and well? Then we're kind of fucked up. We're really screwed. Because neither parent really is a suitable role model for us upon which to build our own identity. And we do feel lost. But if you get to work with somebody to help repair your core, and I'm not talking about analysis work, I'm not talking about psychotherapy, I'm talking about healing the heart work, you will one day be strong enough and empowered enough to walk away from that toxic relationship with your parent. And you can give them an ultimatum. And you can even say it came from me. And you can sit that parent down and say, look, here's the deal. If you don't start acting like you love me and that you're concerned about my well-being, and I can't start really feeling like you care about me, and my inner experience of this relationship, you're going to lose a son. Or you're going to lose a daughter. I did this with my dad once upon a time. Many years ago. It was something he did over and over and over again that distanced me, annoyed me. Eroded the foundation of our connection together. And I sat him down one day and I said, and I think this was maybe in my 30s somewhere, when I had finally rebuilt myself from the ground up, or at least had made significant headway with it at that point. And I said, Dad, look, here's the deal. You know, I love you and I respect how you have to believe and what you believe in. But what you do with me when we're in conversation is you break the connection with me, and here's how you do it. And it's not necessary for me to go into detail with you here about that, what exactly he did. But what is important, it's my phone in the background, sorry about that, forgot to turn the ringer off. But what he did distanced me. It made me shut down. It made me disconnect. It broke the bridge between us. And this came up in every single conversation I ever had with him for years in my adulthood. And I said, here's the deal. If this does not stop, you will lose me as a daughter. Now, I wasn't invested in outcome here. I'd already rebuilt myself, like I say, to a point where I realized that my happiness, my well-being didn't depend on my maintaining that relationship with my father. And if I couldn't have that relationship on my terms, to where it could be healthy and nourishing and loving for me, then I didn't want that relationship at all. So after this conversation, my father called me 2 days later, and he said, I just want to thank you, Sherry, for speaking to me as you did. I really want to thank you. And that behavior that he had always engaged in, he never, ever did again. What this indicated to me was he cared enough about the relationship. He loved me enough to do whatever was necessary to maintain it. I was important enough to him for him to do that and to surrender this pattern that he had that drove me further and further away from him. And I hope for your sake, one day you're able to do this. Now, my father wasn't narcissistic. I mean, we all have some narcissism, but my father wasn't a narcissist. And while he wasn't terribly able to articulate his feelings and needs, and he could have used some emotional help in that regard earlier on in his life, he was responsive to what I'd put out there to him. He was able to be responsive, empathic enough to be responsive to me and my need. And what it meant was we'd be able to rebuild a bridge together and maintain a relationship that had some substance to it. And I was fortunate enough to have the blessing of my father. My father told me several times in my young adult life, I really respect the woman you've become. Now, I didn't need that from my dad. By the time these conveyances came across, I didn't need that from my father. It wasn't like I was always looking for that approval, that confirmation, if you will. But when it came, it felt pretty good. My father respected me because I'd stand up to him. I'd call him on his shit later in life once I was out of the house and I didn't have to worry about being put through a wall. I'd call him on his shit. I'd hold up the mirror to him when he was being hypocritical. And my father was a good enough man that he was able to take that stuff in, own it, recognize it, and realize the need for change in himself. If I hadn't stood up to my father, I would have been like every other member of the family who, when they got their feelings hurt or he upset them, just took themselves away. They just took themselves away. They just cut off the relationship. Passive-aggressively. Punished him by not having anything to do with him anymore. I wasn't like that. I figured, what have I got to lose? Either I confront this guy on his shit, and it evokes change, and helps us build a bridge to each other, or I walk away and I have no father and he has no daughter. Remember that when you put somebody up on a pedestal, they're always looking down on you. So if it's a parent or a lover or whomever it is, when you put somebody up on a pedestal, they're always looking down on you. You will never be seen in their eyes as an equal. It's you that's doing that, not the parent. Not the parent. The narcissistic parent is fragile. Very fragile. All their bravado, the grandiosity, is compensation for this insecure little child inside that's broken, damaged. This is the mask that they construct and maintain, this grandiose, powerful self. It's not power at all. It's just a mask. And the average layman buys into it as, look at what a strong, knowledgeable person that is. But here's the deal, my dears. If you're not walking your talk, what are you? Who are you? If your private persona with the people who are closest to you doesn't match your public persona, who the fuck are you? What is your real value? Now, I've gotten a couple of calls you might have heard in the background while I was doing this video today, recording this for you. And thank you for hanging in here with me. I'm going to go see who called me right now. Take good care. Put your needs first. And bye for now.